folks. Mark Munzer here. For lesson number 2, I'm going to focus on minor chords. We're going to talk about how you construct minor chords, how you figure out the inversions, and we'll also talk about some patterns that will help visual learners. At the end of the lesson, I'll show you how to start to construct some licks with using a technique that is used in a lot of country and blues and rock, which is moving from the minor third to the major third. Let's get started. In lesson 1, we learned how to form a major chord. So for example, in C, where the C major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 1, 3, and 5 make the major chord. To figure out a minor chord, all you do is you take that major third, the third note in the scale, and you move it down 1/2 step. A half step means moving it to the note directly to the left of the note that you're on, which sometimes could be a black key. So for example, C minor is C, E flat, and G. You're taking the C major and you're moving your finger down 1/2 step from the third to the minor third. In different keys, it isn't always a white key to a black key. It can be a black key to a white key. So for example, in the key of E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the E major chord is the 1, the 3, and the 5. The E minor chord, you're moving that 3 down from the major third to the minor third. So a half step below, and that makes the minor sound. In lesson number 1, I taught you how to figure out inversions to major chords. So for example, when you play a C major chord, you can move the bottom note up an octave and create an inversion. Let's do the same thing with the minor chords now, so we get comfortable with the idea of inversions working the same way with minor chords. If you're playing a C minor, you can simply move that C up an octave, and you can play C minor in an inversion where the root is on the top instead of on the bottom. So it's important to think about the notes, the 1, the flat third, the 5th, and you could just play them in a different order. The flat third, the 5th, then the 1, or the 5th, the 1, then the flat third. So you figure out the inversions the same way. Now let's talk a little bit about the patterns that I was talking about for the visual learners and how there are certain patterns that work with minor keys as well. So we talked about a pattern with major keys where a C major had a pattern where there was one white note between each of the notes, and how that was the same pattern for an F major or for a G major. Now let's talk about how that same pattern can be used for 3 of the minor keys. So if we look at A minor, which is A, C, and E, that pattern is a similar pattern where there's one white note between each of the notes in the chord. And that same pattern for a minor, for an A minor, works for a D minor or for an E minor. The same thing could be true with the pattern on, for example, a C minor. So a C minor is a little bit more of a triangle where you're going from a white key to a black key back to a white key. And that triangle pattern for C minor also works, if I'm just going to move my fingers without actually changing the pattern, as an F minor or as a G minor. So if you're one of these people that really learns visually, sometimes looking at those patterns and memorizing which patterns are similar is valuable. Now keep in mind, we talked about C, F, and G. The C, F, and G for the major patterns are the same. The C, F, and G for the minor patterns are all the same. Same is true for A, D, and E. So A major, D major, E major, A minor, D minor, E minor. So knowing those connections between those keys from a pattern perspective can be very helpful in getting used to learning the chords. Now let's just talk for a second about why the inversions are important. I mentioned it in lesson 1. But the reason it's important is to have a smooth transition between chords. So for example, if you were going from a C in root position to an F in root position, you'd be really moving your whole hand up and down the keyboard, and that makes it hard to do a smooth transition. So if instead, when you played a C, you went to F in the inversion where the root is in the middle, you'll notice my hand isn't moving at all. All I'm doing is switching fingers from that to that. And that makes it very natural. The same could be true if you played C, for example, in this inversion, where the C is in the middle. If you want to transition to an F, you could move to an F where the F is on the top. And that way, you're really not moving your hand very much, as opposed to moving it all the way up here, right? So you're finding the inversion that is most comfortable to do a transition. Let's do the last one of those. So if you played C with the C on the top, you could simply move up to an F by just moving those two fingers up. The last thing I wanted to show you for this lesson is there's a real important connection between the minor third and the major third, and it's used in a lot of licks. We haven't really talked about licks yet because we've been mostly learning how to do the chords and the inversions. But when you play a lick is just a set of notes, and often when you're playing in blues or country, you're going to use licks that use the minor third and the major third in an interesting way. So to give you an example from a song the Grateful Dead play, we'll look at the riff from On the Road Again. That riff goes something like this. So what's going on with that riff? What you'll hear several times, actually 4 times in that riff, is the minor third to the major third. So you're hearing it at the very beginning of the riff, minor third, major third, bum, 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 minor third, major third, fifth, 1, bum, 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 bum. You're also hearing it repeated, but at the end of the riff, you're hearing it again. Minor third, major third, 1. The minor third is sometimes called the flat third because this is an E and this is an E flat. So if you have a flat third, it's the same thing as a minor third. So flat third, third, fifth, 1, 6, 5, flat third, third, 5, 1. When you're learning any riff, you should always start slow. Then you can work on speeding it up. But start slow, because if you start trying to play it fast, you're going to wind up fumbling over your fingers a little bit. And so much of piano playing is around muscle memory and getting used to playing something in the same way. I'm going to show you one more trick on a minor to major third, which will really improve your playing. When you're playing chords, like for example a C, and maybe you're going to an F, when you're going to play your C chord, one of the things that piano players often do that makes the chord sound a little bit cooler is you slide from the minor third to the major third. But you don't do it as 2 separate notes like I did when I played that riff. You do it as a slide, where you can essentially take your finger, put it on the edge of the black key, and slide it from the black key to the white key. That sound of that little sort of pickup note of the minor to a major is really cool, and it means when you play a C, it just has that little extra kind of cool sound that you don't get when you play it straight. So that's important when you start to play rock and roll, where you want to do licks that are like, where you just kind of move off of that minor third to the major third. We'll get into some more complicated licks in later lessons. Thanks for watching Lesson 2. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Grateful 88 Piano, and we'll see you back here for the next lesson.